The mining station on Kepler 442b hummed with the constant drone of atmospheric processors and mineral extractors. Marcus Chen wiped sweat from his forehead as he finished his 12-hour shift in the deep tunnels. The red dwarf sun cast an eerie orange glow through the transparent aluminum dome that protected the human settlement from the planet's harsh winds. Marcus had been on this remote world for 8 months now, working as a geological surveyor for the Terra Mining Consortium. The pay was excellent, but the isolation was brutal. The nearest human settlement was 3 star systems away, and supply ships only arrived every 6 months. Most of his fellow miners had families back on Earth or the colony worlds, but Marcus had volunteered for this assignment precisely because he had nowhere else to go. The cafeteria was nearly empty when he arrived for his evening meal. The automated kitchen had prepared synthetic protein steaks with reconstituted vegetables, hardly gourmet, but nutritious enough to keep the miners healthy and productive. Marcus grabbed his tray and headed to his usual spot near the observation window, where he could watch the alien landscape while he ate. Kepler-442b was a strange world. Despite being in the habitable zone of its star, the planet was mostly barren rock and crystalline formations. The atmosphere was breathable for humans with minor filtration, but native life was scarce. The company's xenobiology reports had documented only a few species of hardy microorganisms and some insect-like creatures that lived in the planet's vast cave systems. As Marcus cut into his synthetic steak, a flash of movement outside the window caught his eye. He leaned forward, pressing his face against the cool glass. The mining station's external lights illuminated about 50 meters of the rocky terrain, creating stark shadows. Among the jagged crystal outcroppings, there it was again, something small and quick darting between the rocks. Marcus had seen the local insects before, but this seemed different, larger, more purposeful in its movements. He continued eating, occasionally glancing up to watch for the mysterious creature. The station's external sensors hadn't detected any large life forms in the area, so he wasn't concerned about danger. Curiosity, however, was a different matter. After finishing his meal, Marcus decided to investigate. He grabbed an environmental suit from the equipment locker and made his way to the station's main airlock. The night shift supervisor, Rodriguez, barely looked up from her tablet as Marcus logged his exit. "Going for a walk again, Chun?" she asked with a tired smile. "You know there's nothing out there but rocks and more rocks." "Can't sleep anyway," Marcus replied, sealing his helmet. "Might as well get some fresh air." The planet's atmosphere was thin but breathable, though most humans preferred the security of environmental suits during extended exposure. Marcus stepped through the airlock and onto the rocky surface. His suit's lights cut through the perpetual twilight, casting dancing shadows as he moved. He made his way toward the area where he'd seen the movement, stepping carefully over the uneven terrain. The gravity here was about 80% of Earth normal, making each step feel slightly bouncy. Crystal formations jutted up from the ground like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting his lights in prismatic patterns. Marcus was about to give up his search when he heard it, a soft, almost musical chirping sound coming from behind a large boulder. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle whatever was making the noise. As he rounded the boulder, his lights illuminated something that made him stop dead in his tracks. Huddled against the base of the rock was a creature, unlike anything in the company's xenobiology reports. It was roughly the size of a house cat, but its anatomy was entirely alien. Its body was covered in scales that shimmered with an iridescent blue-green color, shifting and changing as the creature moved. 4 delicate wings sprouted from its back, currently folded against its sides. Its head was elongated and graceful, with large, intelligent eyes that reflected his lights like precious gems. A dragon. There was no other word for it. A tiny, perfect dragon. The creature looked up at Marcus with those luminous eyes, tilting its head in a gesture that seemed almost curious rather than fearful. It made the chirping sound again, and Marcus realized it might be trying to communicate. "Hey there, little one," Marcus said softly, crouching down to make himself less intimidating. "Where did you come from?" The dragon, for that's what Marcus had decided to call it, watched him intently. Its scales rippled with color changes that seemed to correspond to its emotional state. Right now they were shifting between deep blue and pale silver, which Marcus interpreted as wariness mixed with curiosity. As Marcus observed the creature more closely, he noticed something concerning. The dragon appeared to be quite thin, its scales dull in places where they should have been vibrant. Its movements were slightly sluggish, and it kept glancing around as if searching for something. "You're hungry, aren't you?" Marcus murmured. At the word hungry, the dragon's eyes seemed to brighten. It took a tentative step toward Marcus, then stopped. As if unsure whether the large alien creature was a threat or a potential source of help, Marcus slowly reached into his suit's emergency supply pouch and pulled out a nutrition bar. He unwrapped it and broke off a small piece. Holding it out toward the dragon, the creature's nostrils flared as it caught the scent of the food. Its scales shifted to a warm golden color, and it moved closer, though still maintaining a respectful distance. "It's okay," Marcus said gently. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dragon stretched its neck forward, delicately taking the piece of nutrition bar from Marcus's gloved hand. It chewed thoughtfully, then made a pleased chirping sound. The golden color in its scales intensified, and it looked up at Marcus with what could only be described as hope. Marcus felt something stir in his chest, an emotion he hadn't experienced in months. Here was a creature alone and hungry on this barren world, just like he was. But unlike his own self-imposed isolation, the dragon's solitude seemed genuinely pitiable. He broke off another piece of the nutrition bar and offered it to the creature. This time, the dragon approached without hesitation, gently taking the food from his hand. As it ate, Marcus noticed that its scales were becoming more vibrant, the colors shifting through a spectrum of warm hues. "You know," Marcus said, settling into a more comfortable position on the rocky ground, "I was about to head back inside for some dessert. Would you like to join me?" The dragon tilted its head, those intelligent eyes studying Marcus's face through his helmet visor. Then, to Marcus's amazement, it spread its delicate wings and fluttered up to perch on his shoulder. The weight was negligible, but the significance was enormous. This tiny creature, this impossible dragon on an impossible world, had chosen to trust him. Marcus stood carefully, making sure not to disturb his new companion. "All right then," he said softly. "Let's go get something to eat." As they made their way back to the mining station, Marcus found himself wondering about the dragon's origins. The planet's surveys had shown no complex life forms, yet here was a creature that displayed clear intelligence and the ability to fly. Where had it come from? Were there others of its kind? More importantly, what was he going to do about it? The mining consortium had strict protocols about undiscovered life forms. Any new species was to be reported immediately, documented, and studied. The creature would likely be taken away for research, probably ending up in a laboratory somewhere in the inner systems. Marcus looked at the tiny dragon perched on his shoulder, its scales now glowing with a soft, contented warmth. The creature had been alone and hungry, just as he was. It had asked for help in the only way it could, and he had answered. Whatever happened next, Marcus knew he couldn't betray that trust. Not yet, anyway. As they approached the station's airlock, the dragon made a soft trilling sound, almost like a purr. Marcus smiled for the first time in weeks. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think we're going to be good friends." Marcus faced his first major problem before even entering the airlock. How could he bring an undocumented alien life form into the station without triggering every biosafety protocol the mining consortium had installed? The dragon seemed to sense his dilemma. It chirped softly and looked at him with those intelligent eyes, then did something remarkable. The creature's scales shifted to match the exact color and texture of Marcus's environmental suit. Within seconds, it had become nearly invisible against his shoulder. "Adaptive camouflage," Marcus whispered in amazement. "You clever little thing." He approached the airlock with newfound confidence. The automated systems scanned him for contamination and cleared him for entry. As the inner door opened, Marcus held his breath, but the station's internal sensors detected nothing unusual. Once inside the equipment room, Marcus carefully removed his helmet. The dragon immediately dropped its camouflage, scales returning to their natural blue-green shimmer. It looked around curiously at the human technology, wings twitching with apparent interest. "Welcome to my world," Marcus said softly. "Now, let's get you some proper food." He made his way to his personal quarters, a small but private space that served as bedroom, office, and storage area. The dragon explored the room with careful steps, investigating every corner and surface. When Marcus opened his emergency food supplies, the creature's attention immediately focused on him. Marcus had been saving a real protein bar, actual chicken and rice from Earth for a special occasion. Looking at the thin dragon, he decided this qualified. He broke the bar into small pieces and offered them one by one to his new companion. The dragon ate with delicate precision, never being greedy but clearly savoring every bite. As it fed, its scales grew more vibrant and its movements became more energetic. "You know," Marcus said as he watched the creature eat, "I should probably give you a name. Can't keep calling you dragon forever." The creature looked up at him, head tilted in that curious way. "How about Dumber? Your scales glow like little coals when you're happy." At the sound of the name, Ember's scales brightened to a warm golden color. Marcus had decided the dragon was female based on her graceful movements, made a pleased, trilling sound. "Ember it is then," Marcus confirmed. Over the next few hours, Marcus learned that Ember was far more intelligent than he had initially realized. She seemed to understand basic human speech, responding appropriately to simple commands and questions. More remarkably, she appeared to be trying to learn his language. When Marcus said water, Ember looked toward his drinking supply. When he said light, she glanced at the room's illumination panels. She was making connections, learning patterns. As the station's night cycle deepened, Marcus prepared for sleep. He was exhausted from his shift and the evening's excitement, but he worried about leaving Ember alone. Where would she sleep? Was she comfortable in the artificial environment? Ember solved the problem by curling up on his pillow, her warm body no larger than a small cat. Her scales had shifted to a deep, peaceful blue, and she made soft, contented sounds as she settled in for the night. Marcus lay down carefully, not wanting to disturb his tiny roommate. As he began to drift off, he felt Ember's warmth against his head and heard her gentle breathing. For the first time since arriving on Kepler 442, he didn't feel alone. He was awakened 6 hours later by an urgent alarm. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the station, and the intercom crackled to life. "All personnel to emergency stations. We have a massive storm system approaching from the south. This is not a drill. Repeat, all personnel to emergency stations." Marcus jolted upright, immediately looking for Ember. She was perched on his desk, scales flickering with rapid color changes that indicated alarm and confusion. The station's emergency lighting was clearly frightening her. "It's okay," Marcus said, quickly pulling on his clothes. "Just a storm. The station can handle it." But as he made his way to his emergency station in the geology lab, Marcus realized this storm might be more serious than usual. Through the lab's reinforced windows, he could see the approaching tempest, a wall of wind and debris stretching from the ground to the upper atmosphere. Kepler-442b single quotes, as storms were legendary throughout the mining consortium. The planet's thin atmosphere and constant stellar radiation created weather systems that could last for days and reach wind speeds of over 300 kilometers per hour. The mining station had been built to withstand such storms, but they were still dangerous. Ember had followed him to the lab, staying close to his feet. Her scales were now a deep purple color that Marcus was beginning to associate with fear. The poor creature had probably never experienced anything like the station's emergency protocols. "Emergency status report," came Rodriguez's voice over the intercom. "All sections report readiness." One by one, the station's department heads checked in. Life support, power, structural integrity, mining operations, all systems were secure. The storm would pass over them in approximately 4 hours. As the wind began to hit the station, Ember moved closer to Marcus. She was trembling slightly, and her scales had gone almost black with fear. Marcus reached down and gently scooped her up, letting her perch on his shoulder. "Hey," he whispered. Remember how I shared my food with you? Well, now you're sharing this storm with me. We'll get through it together. Ember's scales lightened slightly, shifting to a deep blue. She pressed against his neck, seeking comfort from his warmth. The storm hit with the force of a freight train. Even inside the reinforced station, they could hear the howling wind and the impact of debris against the outer walls. The lights flickered occasionally as the power grid adjusted to the electromagnetic interference. Marcus tried to focus on his monitoring duties, but he kept glancing at Ember. The little dragon was handling the storm better now, though her scales still showed stress patterns. She seemed fascinated by the readouts on Marcus's equipment, watching the seismic monitors that tracked the storm's impact. That's when something strange happened. As Marcus watched the seismic data, he noticed an anomaly. The readings were showing vibrations that didn't match the storm patterns. Something was moving underground. Something large. "Rodriguez," Marcus called over the intercom. "Are you seeing these seismic readings?" "Negative, Chun. All our attention is on weather monitoring." "What are you picking up?" Marcus studied the data more carefully. The underground movement was following a pattern, almost like migration. Large creatures moving through the planet's cave systems. Disturbed by the storm's electromagnetic effects, Ember suddenly became very alert. Her scales shifted to bright silver and she chirped urgently, pointing one delicate claw toward the floor. She was sensing something Marcus's instruments couldn't detect. "Rodriguez, I think we need to check the lower levels. Something's happening down there." "Chun, we're in the middle of a storm emergency. Whatever it is can wait." But Ember was becoming increasingly agitated. She fluttered off Marcus's shoulder and landed on his seismic monitor, pointing insistently at specific readings. Her scales were flashing in rapid patterns that seemed almost like Morse code. Marcus studied the data where Ember was pointing. There, a massive underground movement directly beneath the station. Something was rising through the cave system, heading toward the surface. "Rodriguez, you need to listen to me. There's something big coming up from below. We need to evacuate the lower levels now." "Chun, what are you talking about? Our deep sensors aren't showing anything?" Marcus looked at Ember, who was still flashing her scales in urgent patterns. He was faced with a choice: ignore the warnings of a tiny dragon he'd known for less than a day, or risk looking like a fool by insisting on an evacuation based on alien intuition. Ember chirped once more, then did something that made the decision for him. She projected a three-dimensional hologram from her scales, a perfect representation of the cave system beneath the station. The image showed massive creatures, dozens of them, moving upward through tunnels the mining consortium had never detected. "My God," Marcus whispered. "Rodriguez, we have a serious problem." The hologram showed the creatures reaching the station's foundation in less than 30 minutes. Whatever they were huge and they were heading directly for the human settlement. Marcus grabbed his communicator. "Rodriguez, I'm initiating evacuation protocols for levels 1 through 3. We have incoming subterranean life forms." "Chun, you don't have authority to—" The discussion was interrupted by a deep rumbling that shook the entire station. Emergency alarms began blaring as structural sensors detected something massive impacting the foundation. Ember's scales went bright white, a color Marcus hadn't seen before. She was practically vibrating with urgency. "All hands," Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom, now deadly serious. "Evacuation of lower levels immediately. Unknown seismic activity detected beneath the station." Marcus scooped Ember up and ran for the emergency stairs. As they climbed toward the upper levels, he could hear sounds from below, not just rumbling, but something else. Something that sounded almost like communication. "What are they?" Marcus asked Ember as they reached the safety of level 5. The next few hours changed everything, Marcus thought. He knew about first contact protocols. The massive creatures beneath the station weren't attacking, they were singing dot as the mining. Personnel huddled in the upper levels. The deep rumbling sounds from below began to form patterns. Musical patterns. The creatures were communicating with each other through harmonics that resonated through the planet's crystal formations. Ember perched on Marcus's shoulder. her scales shifting through the same frequency patterns as the songs from below. She was translating, Marcus realized. The little dragon was somehow connected to these massive beings. "Rodriguez," Marcus called over the emergency channel. "The creatures aren't hostile. They're trying to communicate." "Chun, how could you possibly know that?" Marcus looked at Ember, whose scales were now projecting complex mathematical sequences, prime numbers, geometric progressions, the universal constants that any intelligent species would recognize, because someone's translating for us. When Rodriguez and the other senior staff saw Ember's holographic projections, their jaws dropped. The tiny dragon was displaying star charts, showing the location of Kepler 442b and the surrounding systems. She was demonstrating intelligence, spatial awareness, and mathematical understanding that rivaled human capabilities. "Where did you find this creature?" Rodriguez whispered. "She found me," Marcus replied. "She was hungry and she asked for help." Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's xenobiologist, approached slowly, her scanner in hand. "The readings are incredible. She's not carbon-based like Earth life. She's a silicon crystal hybrid. Her entire body is essentially a living computer." Ember seemed to understand the scanner's purpose and held perfectly still while Dr. Kim took readings. When the examination was complete, the little dragon projected a detailed anatomical diagram of herself, pointing out structures that the human technology had missed. "She's teaching us," Dr. Kim breathed. "She's actually teaching us about her own biology." The songs from below grew louder, more complex. Through the station's sensors, they could see the massive creatures gathering in a large cavern directly beneath them. They weren't trying to break through to the surface. They were waiting. Ember chirped urgently and projected another hologram, this one showing herself flying between the humans and the underground dwellers. The meaning was clear. She wanted to serve as an intermediary. "Absolutely not," Rodriguez said immediately. "We're not sending our only translator into an unknown situation." But Marcus understood something the others didn't. Ember wasn't asking permission. She was explaining what was going to happen. The little dragon had been sent to make contact with humanity, and the storm had simply accelerated the timeline. "She's not our translator," Marcus said quietly. "We're hers. She's been studying us, learning about humanity through me." Ember's scales brightened to confirm his understanding. She projected one final image, Marcus and herself standing together in the cavern below, surrounded by the massive crystal beings. It wasn't a request for permission, it was an invitation. 2 hours later, Marcus found himself in the deepest part of the mining station's sublevels. Wearing a full environmental suit and carrying enough emergency gear to survive underground for days. Ember rode on his shoulder, her scales glowing with an excited golden radiance. The mining tunnels connected to the natural cave system through a series of narrow passages that had been sealed during the original construction. It took the station's engineers an hour to safely reopen the pathway. They descended into the planet's depths. Marcus marveled at the crystalline formations surrounding them. The caves weren't just rock, they were vast chambers of living crystal that pulsed with their own inner light. The formations responded to Ember's presence, brightening as she passed. "It's beautiful," Marcus whispered over the communication channel. The main chamber was larger than any cathedral Marcus had ever seen. Massive crystalline beings moved slowly through the space, their bodies partially merged with the rock formations. They were ancient, Marcus realized. Some of them might have been growing in these caverns for thousands of years. As he entered the chamber, the giants turned their attention to him. They communicated through harmonic resonance that he could feel in his bones. Ember translated their songs into holographic displays that floated in the air around them. "Welcome, surface dweller. We have waited long for this moment." Marcus stared at the translated message. "You've been expecting us?" The largest of the crystal beings, a magnificent creature whose body stretched nearly 50 meters through the chamber, responded through Ember's translation. "We felt your ships arrive in our sky. We sensed your digging in our earth. We sent one of our children to learn about your kind." Marcus looked at Ember with new understanding. "You're their ambassador." Ember's scales shifted through a complex pattern that Dr. Kim later described as visual laughter. The concept of formal diplomacy was apparently amusing to her. I chose to study the lonely one. Ember's message appeared in the air. The one who shared food without expectation of return. The one who understood hunger. Over the next several hours, Marcus learned that Kepler 442b was home to one of the galaxy's oldest continuous civilizations. The crystal beings had been observing space for millennia, watching the rise and fall of countless species. They had seen humanity's first tentative steps into space and had been waiting to make contact when the time was right, but they had never expected humans to arrive on their world so soon. The mining operations, while not harmful to the deep-dwelling civilization, had been causing minor disruptions to their harmonic communication networks. The storm had amplified these disruptions, triggering an involuntary gathering response from crystal beings across the planet. Your people dig carefully, but they do not understand the songs in the stone. The Ancient One explained through Ember, we do not wish conflict, but we must protect the harmony of our world. Marcus found himself in the unprecedented position of conducting humanity's first formal diplomatic negotiation with an alien species. Using Ember as a translator, he explained humanity's need for the rare minerals found on Kepler 442b, while the crystal beings described their need to maintain the planetary resonance networks that sustained their civilization. The solution, when it came, was elegantly simple. The crystal beings offered to help humanity locate mineral deposits that wouldn't interfere with their harmonic networks. In exchange, humanity would help them establish communication with other worlds, carrying their songs to the broader galaxy. It was a partnership that would benefit both species immensely. Humanity gained access to mineral wealth beyond imagination, while the crystal beings could finally share their ancient wisdom with the universe at large. But the real breakthrough came when Ember proposed something neither species had considered: a permanent exchange program. Young crystal beings like herself could serve as cultural ambassadors, living among humans and learning about their technology and social structures. Meanwhile, selected humans could study with the Ancient Ones, learning to hear the songs in stone and crystal. Marcus volunteered immediately. 6 months later, the mining station on Kepler 442b had been transformed into humanity's first interspecies diplomatic outpost. Marcus served as the chief liaison between humans and the crystal civilization. While Ember had become something of a celebrity throughout human space, the tiny dragon had grown during their time together, not in size but in confidence and capability. She could now project complex holographic environments, translate between multiple languages, and even compose her own musical frequencies that resonated with both human technology and crystal harmonics. But Marcus's favorite moments were still the quiet ones, when Ember would curl up on his pillow at night and they would share simple human food while she told him stories of the ancient world beneath their feet. You know, Marcus said one evening as they watched the alien sunset through their quarters window, when you first asked to share my meal, I thought I was helping you. Ember's scales shifted to warm amber, her way of expressing gentle amusement. But you were really helping me, weren't you? You knew I was lonely. You knew I needed a friend. Ember chirped softly and nuzzled against his hand. Her response appeared as floating text in the air. Sometimes the greatest discoveries begin with the smallest acts of kindness. You shared your food with a hungry stranger. In return, you helped your species find their place among the stars? Marcus smiled, remembering that first night when a tiny dragon had looked up at him and asked for help. He had said yes without thinking, acting on simple human compassion. That decision had changed the course of history for both their species. As he watched the crystal formations on the horizon pulse with the ancient songs of an alien civilization, Marcus reflected on the power of that moment. Humanity had always wondered what first contact would look like, whether it would be ships in the sky, signals from space, or invasion fleets bearing down on Earth. No one had imagined it would be a small, hungry creature asking to share a meal, but perhaps that was the most human thing of all, that their first diplomatic contact with an alien species had begun with an act of simple kindness. one person sharing food with another being in need. Ember curled up beside him, her scales glowing with contentment as the alien stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, and new opportunities to build bridges between worlds. Tonight, though, Marcus was simply grateful for the friendship of a tiny dragon who had taught humanity that sometimes the most profound journeys begin with the smallest steps, and that sharing a meal with a stranger could literally change the universe.